Hi. This week, which is week 5 in CRA 6209, we explore the concept of safety risk management and the many safety risk assessments that occur during the development of an investigational product and post-marketing safety surveillance practices in the marketplace. Safety risk management encompasses ongoing assessments of potential and real safety risks in pharmaceutical products to ensure quality. Quality in safety risk management translates to ensuring the integrity of the safety data generated in clinical research and in the marketplace, and that patients are adequately protected and informed of safety risks. The product safety profile is the aggregate of all safety data generated from non-clinical and clinical data and is created in the early stages of development and maintained and assessed throughout the product's life cycle. Safety monitoring, sometimes termed pharmacovigilance, is an ongoing process of collecting, monitoring, and assessing adverse events which are incorporated into the product's safety profile. In the world of clinical research and drug development, safety is evaluated within the context of risk-benefit. In CRA 6209, our focus is really on one half of this regulatory paradigm. However, in the back of your mind, remember that safety assessments for pharmaceutical products in development and in the marketplace are typically made in the context of benefits. That is, the efficacy must outweigh the safety risks. This week's lecture provides you first with an overview of what types of information makes up the safety profile. This lecture is then organized to somewhat follow the order of what is occurring in the actual development of a new drug and its safety profile. We'll discuss the initial stages of drug development, starting with the first non-clinical studies. Then we discuss the role of the investigator's brochure in safety risk management. The next discussion focuses on the first regulatory submission, the IND, and IND safety reporting requirements. And we'll review the regulatory terminology and requirements for adverse event reporting under the IND and also in some recent FDA guidance documents issued by FDA within the last 5 years. We then briefly discuss the sponsor's responsibilities in safety reporting during clinical trial conduct, followed by the investigator's responsibilities. This lays the foundation for having a better understanding of the clinical trial contributions, which provide much of the basis for assessing risk in the analysis of risk-benefit for a marketing application and the subsequent marketing approval. There are many stakeholders, some of which we identify, followed by some key themes you should take away from this week and think about. An investigational product's risks are evaluated throughout its development. The sponsor initiates preclinical studies once a lead candidate is chosen to enter the sponsor's development portfolio. The safety profile of an investigational drug is created and updated as new safety data are generated from non-clinical studies and clinical trials, which are typically a combination of both placebo-controlled and open-label clinical trials. During the preparation of the marketing application, the safety database, which contains all clinical safety data, that is, all adverse events across all controlled and open-label studies, is thoroughly examined by the sponsor. A composite safety profile is presented in the integrated summary of safety, which is in the marketing application, and the ISS provides the overall safety assessment in the U.S. marketing application. And we'll discuss that in a bit more detail in just a bit. The end goal is a marketing application which presents an accurate safety profile, which will contribute to the regulatory benefit risk assessment decision making. Once a drug is marketed, safety risk assessment continues through post-marketing surveillance activities. Now, you'll hear in this presentation and in various places terms non-clinical and preclinical, and these are used interchangeably in drug development and refer to the in vivo animal studies. In vivo means in the body, and or in vitro studies. In vitro means outside of the body, such as in a test tube or petri dish. Non-clinical studies consist of pharmacology and toxicology studies and are the first studies conducted to evaluate the safety of a new drug. Non-clinical study results characterize potential safety and toxic pharmacodynamic effects. Pharmacodynamics is how the drug acts on the body. And these pharmacodynamic effects might highlight potential safety signals with respect to the action of the drug on the body's target organs. For example, the impact on heart rate, kidney function, and the reproductive system, as well as pharmacokinetic measures, which is how the body acts on the drug, pharmacokinetics. And pharmacokinetic measures elucidate absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of the drug. Short-term name ADME. Certain non-clinical study designs evaluate the impact of increasing doses administered over time on the safety of the drug. For example, dose-rising studies, and elucidate the potential for a dose-dependent adverse event relationship. In addition, particularly in toxicology studies, one typical non-clinical study design is to include a recovery period to explore the potential reversibility of toxic effects observed. These initial pharmacology and toxicology study results provide the first safety data to make the determination as to whether the investigational drug is safe enough to administer to humans. In addition, these data contribute to estimating the initial starting doses in the clinic, selecting the types of physical examination procedures to include in the protocol, and identifying the protocol inclusion-exclusion criteria, all for those initial phase 1 studies. Typically, the longer-term non-clinical chronic, 1 year or more, and carcinogenicity studies are conducted in parallel during phase 2 and 3 trials to establish the safety of the investigational product over time, and of course for the carcinogenicity studies, explore carcinogenic potential and other aspects that are identified during the development of the drug. Now we turn to the investigator brochure, which is also known as the IB for short. The IB is a clinical regulatory document that provides key stakeholders such as the FDA, investigators, institutional review boards, and ethics committees, to name a few, with the known benefits and safety risks for the investigational product under study. The IB actually contains summary information in 3 areas, which are also reflected in the IND, or Investigational New Drug Application. These are chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, CMC for short, non-clinical information, and clinical information. In addition, the IB is required to be submitted as part of the original IND submission, and it does play an important role in safety risk management during clinical development. During the development of an investigational product, the IB functions as the very early stage prescribing information, as it is the repository of summary information related to all known CMC, non-clinical, and clinical data, and that is all benefit and risk data. The IB lists the adverse events and suspected adverse reactions and any precautions that should be taken during a clinical trial. As non-clinical and clinical studies are completed, the IB is updated on a regular basis, but by FDA requirements must be updated at least once a year. Some updates, such as a new safety finding that represents a significant risk to study subjects, are required to be communicated by the sponsor to investigators immediately, as well as updated in the IB as per 21 CFR 312.55, titled Informing Investigators. So the investigators would receive a safety report immediately. In summary, the investigator brochure contains summaries of all the efficacy data and safety risks and is considered the foundation clinical regulatory document and used to begin to develop the draft prescribing information for inclusion in the sponsor's marketing application. We're now at the stage of drug development where the sponsor has conducted the non-clinical studies required to establish the drug is safe enough to be administered to humans. At this point, the sponsor is compiling the investigational new drug application sections because it's getting ready to submit the original IND to FDA. The IND, or Investigational New Drug Application, is the first regulatory submission that alerts FDA that the sponsor plans to conduct a clinical trial with an investigational product. The IND includes data to support the sponsor's position that the drug is safe enough to be administered to human beings in the initial clinical trial, and allows FDA to review the information prior to the sponsor and investigator initiating a clinical trial. Now, FDA does not formally approve the IND, but must accept the submission within a 30-day review period. In cases where FDA has a safety or other concern, the FDA contacts the sponsor to request more information before the 30 days are up, or they even may issue a clinical hold letter to not begin the clinical trial until the identified issue or issues are resolved. Again, FDA must act within that 30-day window. An IND is comprised of information in three main areas, which are, again, reflected in the investigator brochure. Animal, pharmacology, and toxicology studies, which we'll term non-clinical, and includes all non-clinical reports or sometimes just summaries, which are what's required now for INDs, that support the safety of the compound. Manufacturing information, which is under the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls section, and this is also termed quality information on the drug substance and investigational drug product at this stage. And at this stage, these are investigational clinical supplies, not market dosage forms. The CMC information contains data and information on the drug substance and product to ensure that both the drug substance, which is the active ingredient, and the clinical dosage forms, which are the investigational clinical supplies, meet analytical and release standards, as well as the third section, clinical information, which contains the protocol, investigator documentation, the investigator brochure, and investigational plan. Now we're just going to briefly go over some regulatory key safety risk terminology. And this is cited directly from the FDA guidance issued in 2012 on safety reporting requirements for INDs and bioavailability/bioequivalence studies from pages 3 to 7. And I just want to go over these terms because they really are critically important for you to understand in examining safety risk management. Adverse event means any untoward medical occurrence associated with the use of a drug in humans, whether or not considered drug related. Adverse reaction means any adverse event caused by a drug. Thus, there is reason to conclude that the drug caused the event. Let me caution you that when you read, it could be articles or protocols, these words are sometimes used interchangeably in the industry. Now we'll turn back to suspected adverse reaction, which means any adverse event for which there is a reasonable possibility that the drug caused the adverse event. This category implies a lesser degree of certainty about causality than adverse reaction. An unexpected adverse event or reaction is an adverse event or suspected adverse reaction not listed in the investigator brochure or prescribing information. An adverse event or suspected adverse reaction is considered serious if, in the view of either the investigator or sponsor, it results in any of the following outcomes: death, a life-threatening adverse event, inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization, a persistent or significant incapacity or substantial disruption of the ability to conduct normal life functions, or a congenital anomaly or birth defect. An adverse event or suspected adverse reaction is considered life-threatening if, in the view of either the investigator or sponsor, its occurrence places the patient or subject at immediate risk of death. A serious, unexpected, suspected adverse reaction, which is abbreviated to be SUSAR, is defined by FDA and EU as a serious adverse event not previously observed with the product and that has a reasonable possibility of having been caused by the product. Now we're going to turn to the sponsor's requirements in IND safety reporting. And of course, when you're conducting trials in the U.S., all the clinical trials are performed under an IND. The sponsor is required to submit expedited safety reports for all serious, unexpected, suspected adverse reactions to FDA within 7 to 15 days after the initial receipt of the investigator's safety reports. The sponsor assesses the seriousness of the adverse event, whether the adverse event appears to be caused by the investigational product, and also checks to see if the adverse event is already reported in the investigator brochure. The sponsor must submit an expedited safety report within 7 days of receipt for any unexpected death or life-threatening suspected adverse reaction. The sponsor must submit an expedited safety report within 15 days for other serious, unexpected, suspected adverse reactions or serious, unexpected, suspected risks from other trials, clinical trials, non-clinical studies, or epidemiological studies done with the investigational product that are not the specific IND study. Any follow-up information must be submitted within 2 weeks after the initial IND safety report is received by FDA. Therefore, if a sponsor submits an IND expedited safety report within 7 days, they must obtain any follow-up information within the next 2 weeks and then supplement that initial safety report. The sponsor company functions typically include a clinical safety and pharmacovigilance function, although sometimes they are separate in companies, one focused only on IND reporting, the other on marketed products. And clinical safety and pharmacovigilance is the function that typically receives and evaluates all adverse events from all clinical trials and also post-marketing. It is typically this function that performs the assessment and evaluation and prepares the IND safety reports to be submitted to FDA or post-marketing if it's a post-marketed drug. Clinical safety works closely with regulatory affairs to ensure that all FDA reporting requirements are met. The sponsor obviously plays a key role in managing safety risks for their products. So, in addition, sponsors must submit any serious, unexpected, suspected adverse reactions from any other clinical trials and non-clinical trials with the same IND product as an IND safety report. And I briefly discussed that in the previous slide. In addition, if the incidence rate of a particular serious, unexpected, suspected adverse reaction increases, the sponsor must also submit an IND safety report. Further, the sponsor should assess a serious, unexpected, suspected AR by unblinding the patient to investigate the possibility of dose-dependent adverse events occurring, or if there are other dose-related safety implications, which obviously can only be investigated if the sponsor knows what the patient was administered. The sponsor assesses and evaluates the safety database of an IND product and updates the safety profile throughout the development process. To ensure a comprehensive review, FDA now recommends that the sponsor create a multidisciplinary safety assessment committee to evaluate and assess safety risks across the compounds in their development portfolio. Depending on the safety risk and implications for patient safety, the sponsor may elect to submit a protocol amendment to modify an ongoing protocol, update the informed consent with new safety data, as well as the investigator brochure. In addition, the sponsor may reinforce the safety reporting requirements by conducting additional training with one or more sites and conducting site audits, as well as conducting an internal audit of their own sponsor clinical safety and pharmacovigilance group. Just very briefly, when you're submitting a serious and unexpected suspected adverse reactions called SUSARs, you use FDA Form 3500A. For reporting SUSARs to the European Medicines Agency, and these would be, for example, if a U.S. sponsor is conducting a global clinical trial and there are sites in the various European countries, they would also, obviously, the sponsor is responsible for adhering to all regulatory authority safety reporting requirements, and they would use the COMS form, which is also explained in ICH E2, Clinical Safety Data Management. And COMS stands for Council for International Organizations for Medical Sciences. In addition, sponsor pharmaceutical companies may propose safety reporting processes to FDA, particularly in large phase 3 trials with thousands of patients, which might have mortality as an endpoint and deal with patients who are very ill coming into these trials. Investigators also play a critical role in safety risk management as they deal directly with the patients. Investigators must report all non-serious and serious adverse events throughout the duration of the clinical trial to the sponsor, whether thought to be related to the administration of the investigational product or not related. And even if the serious adverse event is listed in the investigator brochure, they must report all adverse events to the sponsor. When an investigator reports SAEs, serious adverse events, to the sponsor, the SAE report should provide their assessment of whether there is a reasonable possibility that the investigational drug caused the adverse event. That's causality. The investigator is obligated to keep their IRB informed of any new safety risk information that could impact the subject's safety risk management. Investigators should submit IND safety reports to their IRB if the serious adverse event is unexpected in terms of nature, severity, or frequency, or the investigator's assessment is that the subjects are in greater harm. The investigator should also submit any IND safety report that results in the sponsor modifying the protocol or informed consent form. And obviously, when I'm talking about the IND safety report, that's from the sponsor's IND safety report is what I'm talking about. Also, the investigator should comply if the sponsor asks the investigators to submit certain IND safety reports to their IRB to get the IRB's input as to their recommendation as to any protocol or informed consent changes needed, and also to ask their recommendations for the scope of the dissemination of the new safety information to the subjects in the study. One of the first steps in clinical research to develop a new drug is to create a clinical development plan, CDP. Key safety risk considerations include how many trials are required to ensure there is an adequate number of patients for the safety database and safety profile to support an approvable marketing application. For example, ICH E1 guidance recommends a minimum of 300 to 600 patients on drug, that's investigational drug, for 6 months or more, and at least 100 patients on drug for a year or more. In addition, the CDP includes studies to investigate the pharmacodynamics, how the drug impacts the body, and pharmacokinetics, how the body impacts the drug with ADME, in patients of various ages and in special populations, and explores potential drug interactions, as these data must fully elucidate the aspects required in the prescribing information, that is, the package insert. So when you think of the CDP and its creation, it has to there have to be the studies that inform all of the sections within the prescribing information. In addition, the sponsor must update the investigator brochure with new safety risk information, and also the sponsor considers key protocol elements for each of the studies, such as the dosing scheme and the trial design. For example, should it be an open label trial or double-blind placebo-controlled trial design? Remember, FDA considers the double-blind placebo-controlled trial as the gold standard to evaluate safety and efficacy. This trial design allows the sponsor to better assess drug causality, that is, explore whether the IND drug may have caused a reported safety risk by comparing the adverse event incidence in the control group versus the placebo group. Other protocol elements that have to be considered are the inclusion-exclusion criteria, which defines the population under study, and proposed patient demographics with percentage requirements of males, females, certain age ranges, certain ethnicities, as well as the visit schedule and procedures performed are also very important considerations for safety risk management. There are several other stakeholders in addition to the ones we've discussed: the sponsor pharmaceutical companies, investigators, and FDA. that are involved in managing safety risks during clinical trial conduct and in the marketplace. Some other stakeholders, and this is not an inclusive list, include institutional review boards or ethics committees, European Medicines Agency and other worldwide regulatory agencies, healthcare providers, patient advocacy groups, third-party payers, and others. There are others which are all interested in some way involved in safety risk management. And lastly, the most important stakeholder is the patient. As a quick wrap up, we've explored safety risk management activities in developing an investigational product, which is a very dynamic, complex process. As the investigational product moves through the phases of development, the safety profile is updated and maintained through assessing the large amounts of safety data generated throughout the development program. The preclinical and clinical safety risk information inform ongoing safety risk assessments, which are part of the go-no-go decision-making as the product moves through the development continuum. Preclinical data are the first safety data generated to initiate Phase 1 trials. In Phases 2 and 3, the safety and efficacy data are compiled from each clinical trial in a clinical study report. The clinical study report, also called CSR, is an important clinical regulatory document as it provides a comprehensive evaluation of the safety risks in each clinical trial. CSRs and patient listings from each trial comprise the largest clinical section in a marketing application. The investigator brochure is an important clinical regulatory essential document as well in safety risk management. Summaries of non-clinical and safety data are compiled in the IB, which is updated throughout development. In addition, the investigator brochure plays a key role in safety risk management as it is a precursor document used in preparing the draft prescribing information, which is submitted as part of the marketing application. Once a drug is approved, the sponsor pharmaceutical company continues to evaluate safety and manage safety risks through their own pharmacovigilance efforts and the post-marketing regulatory reporting requirements. Now, what you should get out of this week: what safety risk management encompasses, how non-clinical pharmacology toxicology studies contribute to a new product's safety profile, what role the investigator brochure plays in communicating safety risks in clinical trial conduct, what are some of the FDA IND safety reporting requirements, what are the sponsor and investigator responsibilities in safety risk management during clinical trial conduct, which stakeholder groups are involved in safety risk management, how the industry assesses safety throughout the clinical development of a new product. As you go through the readings and interact with your fellow students, think about how the safety profile is created and maintained. What non-clinical and clinical safety data contribute to safety profile? When are safety assessments performed? What types of safety information does FDA require to assess and manage safety risks at the IND and marketing application stages? Thank you.